Hello, Geekscapists. We're back with another little bonus chat. I am very excited about this. I'm sitting down with Ashley Spencer. Ashley, you have a book out right now. I have it right here beside me. Disney High, the untold story of the rise and fall of the Disney Channel's tween empire, which really kind of, I read a couple chapters of it before sitting down with you. I just got it in the mail about 48 hours ago, so I wasn't able to crush the entire book. But,
Understandable.
you're taking us through kind of the history of how the Disney Channel went from this, like, for my childhood memories, this very exclusive channel that you heard of, and maybe every once in a while for like a weekend you'd get it for free for some reason on cable, but like you all of a sudden it becomes this juggernaut channel when we hit the 2000s, and essentially becomes the thing that gave us some of the biggest names in acting and pop music today. But also it comes with darkness, right? You kind of
Mhm.
cover all sides of that spectrum, and I've been excited to talk to you about this book for, I want to say, close to 4 years. How long have you been working on this
I've been
book? It's
working
been
on
a
it for
while.
about 4 years. It was, I think, announced 3 years ago. So it's been like conceptualized for about 4 years, and then I actually started once I got my deal with St. Martin's, working on the book about 3 years ago. So yeah.
What was the thing that made you decide that you wanted to tell this particular story?
I mean, when you talk about coming up on Disney Channel and it being this exclusive thing, that was how it felt to me as well. And I grew up in Central Florida, where that was one of the last markets for Disney Channel to transition to basic cable. So in the late 90s, it was still that premium offering. So I was one of the kids lured in by the sneak a peek weekends where they would give it to you for free. And I was like, this is incredible. I was a huge pop music fan, still am, but loved NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and Britney, Christina. And they would have these concert specials that they would play on Disney Channel that were exclusive to them. And it had all of those stars that I loved. And they would be performing, but also they do these behind the scenes elements and you get to know them. And it just felt so special in a way that other kids cable at the time wasn't really connecting and tapping into. And so I begged my parents, they added it to our cable package. And I was enamored. I loved that era of Disney Channel, Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, Johnny Tsunami, Smart House, all of those DComs, Lizzie McGuire. Time went on, and my career in media, actually, my first job was at J14 Magazine, which is a tween magazine focused on these young stars. And so I was covering a lot of those Disney Channel kids and kind of thrown back into that world. And then fast forward to 2020 and the pandemic, and I started thinking about what I could do a book on that I would care enough about and know enough about and want to really invest this time and energy into. And I landed on Disney Channel mainly. I couldn't believe no one had told this story before. No one had
That's
really
crazy.
done
Yeah.
anything in depth on Disney Channel at all. When you look at Nickelodeon had a business documentary called The Orange Years. There was an oral history called Slime. Like, people had kind of been poking around Nickelodeon, and but with Disney Channel, there was absolutely nothing other than kind of business articles along the way in the New York Times, or anytime they had hit a milestone, it would be covered. And then, of course, from fandoms
Yeah.
and the profiles of celebrities and the stars that were involved. But no one had looked at this overarching story, and especially in the 2000s, when you look at what, as you said, a juggernaut it became, and really this global empire that involved music and movies and merchandise and cable as well. And so I just felt like there was such an opportunity to, explore and investigate and talk to people that were part of that. And it was really exciting.
I think a part of it, being someone who was living through that time period. I'm 39 right now. So I feel like the heyday of the Disney Channel kind of passed me by. It was one of those things where I remember my siblings watching it more. Like, I
Yeah.
definitely remember the sneak peek premium channel parts of
Mhm.
it. And there's those shows that kind of in retrospect are terrifying at that time period, like the Alice in Wonder like the Adventures in
That
Wonderland
was
and
the early Disney Channel. Yeah,
yeah,
that's like
like
mid-90s. I loved So Weird, which was also terrifying, but that
yeah, like they
watch
just
that?
it
Yeah.
was I actually so I was gonna bring up 3 things and I'll try to juggle them
Okay.
all into a
Sorry.
singular thought. But I do a Christmas podcast and we just covered Christmas Every Day, which was an ABC Family film starring one of the
Eric Von
stars.
Detten.
And we were talking
Yeah.
about how Eric Von Detten had, like, this 5-year period where he was everywhere because of the Disney Channel, like, he was the guy during
Yeah,
because it was
he
Brink,
really
it was,
mhm.
like,
Yeah, and
everything.
then he segued into an ABC TGIF show for a little bit, and so they kinda, like, were looking for places to use him, but yeah, he was the it guy for a moment. I was a big Eric Von Detten fan.
But we were talking about that. There's a Weird Al podcast on our network, and we were just doing an episode on Weird Al did a Disney Channel special called There's No Going Home, and someone uploaded the whole thing on YouTube, and whoever uploaded it had to have taped it when they had one of those sneak peek weekends because
Right.
talk about those things that scratch your nostalgia that you forgot about was just seeing the logo with the phone number show up in the left corner of the screen while you're watching on
Right.
YouTube being like, "You can have this type of entertainment every single day just by calling this number." Like,
Ask your parents to call.
yeah.
You can't call. Get an adult.
You talk about how there's all this coverage of Nickelodeon. I mean, I literally have a Nickelodeon VHS tape pillow behind me. I
I love
think
that.
Nickelodeon in the 2000s when I was in high school, I'd walk into the living room and my sisters would be watching Hannah Montana or iCarly or any of those early to mid 2000 shows. And I'd be like, Psh, you're watching kids stuff. But then I'd still put on Nickelodeon and watch like As Told by Ginger or something like Nickelodeon seemed
Yeah.
to have done a better job of feeling edgy in that
Yeah.
time period. But I think, as you said on the cover, Tween Empire, like
Mhm.
Disney Channel honed in on such a specific demographic that I assume you'll dive into it in the book when I get there, but like an untapped market of like hungry and willing to spend money on every piece of article that they could get on those people.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you're exactly right. Nickelodeon, their whole MO from the beginning was this is a space for kids only. This is
Yeah.
not for your parents. This is an exclusive club for you to be in as a kid. And that involves it being a little bit gross, a little bit messy, a little bit edgy. And so they were really going for that sort of escapism for kids to get away from their parents and feel like they were in their own world on Nickelodeon. And what Disney Channel started to do at the end of the 90s was flip that and decide we're going to be a space that's for, in their minds, family viewing. And so they had done a bunch of research and focus groups. And what they found was millennial kids said that they really wanted to be closer to their parents, that they didn't like this idea of being separate from them. They wanted to have time that they could spend in the living room together with their parents. So Disney Channel starts transitioning in the late 90s with the arrival of these executives who had previously all been at Nickelodeon. So the new president of Disney Channel, Ann Sweeney, the president of entertainment, Rich Ross, they all came from Nickelodeon background and they had been there through all of that. And so they knew what worked at Nickelodeon, but they didn't just repeat that at Disney Channel. They switched to this slightly softer, slightly fuzzier kind of comfort TV at first with dramas, and then you see that the real kind of bridge between those soft family dramas to the sitcoms that I think what people associate now with the heyday of Disney Channel, these loud, brightly lit, multi-camera sitcoms like Hannah Montana, That's So Raven. But the bridge was Lizzie McGuire, which was a single camera show, and it still had that kind of soft vibe, but it was a comedy.
Yeah.
And so they really were just going for something that was it was almost the anti-Nickelodeon. And it worked. And then Nickelodeon was playing catch up with the tween girl market and trying to get iCarly and Victorious and shows like that that could replicate Hannah Montana and Lizzie McGuire's success.
No, that completely makes sense, and I remember I was probably either a senior in high school or early college at the time, but even as you're talking about it, I'm realizing how much the world's kinda bled at a certain point because everything I just said is true, except for the fact that I did watch Even Stevens, and I did
Yeah.
like if Lizzie McGuire was on, I'd be like, oh, I'll watch a little bit of this because it was like funny enough that even at 17 there was going to be jokes and moments that worked for you.
Well, and not to stereotype, but I mean, Nickelodeon did get more of the boy market, and Disney was going for more of the girls. And so on Nickelodeon, you had more of those boy-led cartoons and shows. And then they had experimented with things like Clarissa Explains It All and Alex Mack, which I loved those shows. But then Disney really just went all in on girls, and they would always include. They were very eager to get more male viewers on Disney Channel, but it just didn't come as easily because they what they found was that this formula they had of merchandising everything and doing live shows and incorporating music, the consumers, young girls, were more willing to talk about and wear their pride for these shows. So they would buy the t-shirts that said Hannah Montana. They would go to the concerts.
Yeah.
Boys might be watching the shows, but they weren't spending the money on, they didn't want people to know I'm a fan of the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody in the way that they found young female viewers were. So it was a lot harder for them to tap into that market. Video games were huge with boys at that time.
No, that completely makes sense. And this is also, I mean, we're talking about a time period where everything seemed to be changing. You know what I mean? Like when you hit that, unless you were there to live it, and I forget what they refer to people of our generation specifically as, but like the people who grew up where we remembered a time before the internet was everywhere, but
Mm-hmm.
still the internet was a huge portion of our childhood. Like, if you didn't live through it, you don't truly understand how much it went from like, oh, I like Ren and Stimpy, so I'll go and maybe buy this one Super Nintendo game and like an action figure here or there to like, oh, you like iCarly, even Stevens, whatever. How about you go on the website where we have constantly evolving games for you to play? And like, there's a constant, like,
Yes.
these characters live 24/7 on this particular website. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
could spend hours and days and weeks immersing yourself in that show and those characters and the people who played those characters, and like the way that they crafted that is, I'm glad that you're studying it because it is something worth studying in
Mm.
how well that worked as a selling a TV show character, selling an actress, selling that actress also as a singer, selling that actress
Mm-hmm.
also as a fashionista. Like, and don't forget
And
to go to the website or you won't be cool. Like all of those
yes,
things at
yes. I
once.
mean, yeah, that was something Disney had never done before, and Disney as a corporation really wasn't sold on to start. Especially when you talk about merchandising stars from these kids shows. So Disney's consumer products division, it had all been pretty much in animation and in characters. And so they would put Simba on a t-shirt and they would sell stuffed animals from The Little Mermaid or whatever it may be. That division had never taken like a young star like a Hillary Duff and put her face on a t-shirt and had that work for them in the same way that like by the mid 90s animation was having this huge renaissance for Disney, but the cable TV world and kids shows, they just really were the bottom of the food chain, and the Walt Disney Company did not see the full potential for a long time in what they could do with the talent they had at the network and the resources they had as a corporation with these record labels, with a merchandise division, with a live entertainment division, and all of these global markets. And so that really just starts to fall into place right around the Lizzie McGuire time and everything that came after.
Exactly. And I guess the other question I have to ask, even though it is tying back to the Nickelodeon of it all, but I mean, over the 4 years that you're working on this book, you have Jeanette McCurdy's book comes out, you have Quiet on the Set comes out. Like, you have all these things that show up that are painting Nickelodeon specifically in a very unflattering light of what's happening behind the scenes. Was there a part of you that felt as that was happening that you had to kind of make sure that you were doing your due diligence to cover the good and the bad with Disney High as you were working on it?
Yeah, I was always, I mean, from the very beginning, my goal with the book was to pull back the curtain and not go in with any sort of agenda or sugarcoat anything. And the book is completely independent of Disney. So I
Yeah.
wasn't beholden to portray any sort of glossy version of events that they might want. Um, yes, I went down many alleys. I spoke to many people involved in all these shows, looking at what behavior was going on, what it was really like on those sets. Jeanette, I interviewed her. I did a profile on her for the Washington Post back when her book came out. She's incredible. That book is so good.
It's
Um,
amazing. It's an amazing
yeah.
book.
And with Quiet on Set, my book was it was basically done when Quiet on Set came out. It was in the final um, little rounds of edits that they do. But the interesting thing about Quiet on Set is that most of what was in that documentary wasn't new information. The things that were new, they unsealed the court cases. They got the names of who had written the letters. I think that was very shocking. And they got Drake Bell. Um, they revealed him as the victim. But a lot of that, the allegations against Dan Schneider and the Brian Peck case itself, that was public information. So I already
Yeah.
knew about all of that. I discussed Brian Peck in the book. That was already in there, his involvement on The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. And so that outside stuff didn't really change my agenda at all. It was always the same. And I was already looking into all of that, when those things came out.
So the last thing that I would love to ask before we wrap up, and obviously people definitely need to go and pick up a copy of this, especially as we're hitting the holiday season. There's definitely someone who is going to be very excited to find this underneath their tree. Anybody my age or even younger. Where did you end up feeling when all was said and done? Are you still, the Disney fan that desperately wanted to be a star in your own
Mhm.
Disney Channel series, as you talk about in the introduction, or did this kind of change your view of the things that happened that you enjoyed watching over all those years?
Yeah, I think, that's kind of the paradox of the whole thing is that for so many we have these wonderful memories of watching these shows growing up and they mean so much to so many people. And I don't think anything can take away from that. But I think also, what this book really does is look at this whole world of professional child acting and performing as a young person. And it is a business, it is work, and it is a strange environment to put a kid into. um, not necessarily implying anything nefarious, but just the mechanics of working a full-time job as a kid. I think we've kind of, in the 21st century, kind of decided young children shouldn't really be working. We don't have child labor in any other major industry. And so when you look at all of that, plus what comes along with being a Disney Channel star, which at the time period was extreme fame because they had so much influence, because it was Disney, there was so much attention on these kids. There was so much pressure to be this Disney role model, because the Walt Disney Company, unlike any other company, comes with this lore and this weight of Walt's legacy and Mickey Mouse and what this brand means to families. And so when you put a 15-year-old into that environment, it's really tricky and potentially treacherous. And I mean, I think fame in general, at any age that people come to it, it is not a normal thing to experience, and the psychology of it all, I think, can be extremely damaging. And so I don't have any of the answers. I think you can only really look to the people that have lived that and been through it, and you'll see a variety of experiences. And a lot of these kids refer to their time on their Disney Channel shows as some of the best times in their life. They loved that work. They loved that job. It felt like family. And maybe it was more of a sheltered, welcoming environment than later jobs that they had, because many of them continued in the entertainment industry, like Selena Gomez, Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, the Sprouse twins, Hilary Duff, like almost all, Raven Simone, almost all of them are still, the major stars are still, performing in some way or another. And so, I don't know, but I think it's something to be considered, that do the benefits of having children in these roles and on screen outweigh the potential harmful effects that they endure.
No, I think that's totally fair. I mean, even as early as the prologue, you're talking about the things that the cast of the new Mickey Mouse Club had, and like
Mm.
on one hand, it's like, oh, that's great that they had a therapist on set if they were experiencing exhaustion, but also that's pretty freaking weird that an 11-year-old is already going to need a therapist for exhaustion. Like that's like a
Yeah,
thing that 11-year-olds shouldn't be having to go
right.
through or worry about.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that the new Mickey Mouse Club in general is such a interesting thing to look at just by how many people became huge stars from that not under Disney. Like they like they went off and became huge stars on their own somewhere else after that was over.
Right, well, that
Is
was the big
fascinating.
yeah, that
Like
was Disney's huge loss is that they cut them loose as soon as that show ended, and so you have Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Harry Russell, JC Chasez, and NSYNC, Ryan Gosling, they all just went off and did their own things, and they didn't develop future projects around them, they weren't putting out their music on Disney record labels when they those labels already existed, but they just didn't have the mechanisms in place and the cooperation between these different divisions. Disney there's a lot of hostility between the different branches of Disney. So yeah, it took a
that
while.
that had to have been a huge wake up call to them when like, you know, a couple of years later it's 1998 and like five of the people from your show are now the biggest most famous people in the world and you
Yeah,
have no way of capitalizing on it at all.
you would think that was the wake up call, but it really, I mean, even with Hillary Duff, as you'll see in that chapter when you get to it, they didn't. There wasn't a given. They weren't like,
Yeah,
yes, perfect. She wants to sing. Let's put out her music. It was kind of fighting tooth and nail, and you have these individuals that are really pushing the status quo to move things in a new direction. But people really weren't realizing on a larger scale that this could be a huge moneymaker for them initially.
that's crazy.
Mm.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Where can people go to pick up? I'll hold it up one more time. Pick up their copy of Disney High.
Everywhere and anywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, your local indie bookstore, target.com, anywhere. It's available in hardcover, ebook, and also audiobook. And the audiobook is narrated by Lelaine, who played Miranda Sanchez on Lizzie McGuire. And she does an
Oh,
incredible job. So I highly recommend that version as well.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you.